Most people jump straight into the builder or a template when designing a new Squarespace site, but I want to see if I can leverage Figma, FigJam, and Squarespace together to create a better workflow for myself. I've used Figma in the past, and I know it's a great tool when working with larger teams and more complex design systems, but how can I leverage it for Squarespace? I'm going to walk you through something I'm working on right now with the template that I'm currently designing. All right, so I want to start here with the FigJam board that I created. This is part of Figma. So FigJam is a tool for whiteboarding and brainstorming. It's good for collaboration and kind of just getting your ideas out there. So what I wanted to do was create something that is a quick reference for me when I'm designing. So this includes everything that I would need at a glance. It's important here to have the goals of what you want the site to do, what is the main purpose of this site, and the audience. Who is this site for? Having the tone of voice is also important so you know how you want your content to be written and how you want it to come across when visitors are reading it. And then having some keywords here for SEO. Having this pages whiteboard is for throwing sticky notes on here and creating a rough sitemap version of your website. The features board here is for throwing any stickies for any features that might not justify their own page. This is something like if you want to call out any technical integrations or a feature like signing up for a newsletter. The mood board, this is for putting your inspiration down. So if you want to put screenshots of websites, fonts that you may want to use, color palettes, different kind of references that you can look at a glance that just serves as your inspiration. The nice thing about having this is that people can comment on it also. So if you want to collaborate on this document, you could share it with someone and they could leave comments on any of these boards that you've put together. So here's an example of the FigJam board filled out. This is for a life coach website. So you can see I have the goals, the audience, the tone and keywords filled out here. You also see in the pages, I have my sticky notes here. The reason I like using the sticky notes is because I can put a little more context for the page, so I can add in what the goal of each page is going to be or the type of content that I want to include on it. I also have a section for hidden pages here. This would be a landing page you could drive people to and get them to sign up for your newsletter, and in exchange, they would get a free download out of it. So I'm using the features here to call out some of the things that aren't included in the pages. So just this newsletter sign up, testimonial snippets that I want to use on some of the other pages, calling out that we'll be using the Acuity scheduling that's built into Squarespace for booking. Also want to call out that there's going to be a map on the contact page. And then once we get into the mood board, this is where I start putting in some of my websites that I found inspiring, some screenshots showing different treatments for testimonials here. I also have some screenshots of life coach websites just to see what people in this niche are doing also, and to see if I can get any inspiration from them. I started collecting some different color examples of some palettes that may work well with some of the sites that I'm inspired by, and some of them that work with some of the current life coach websites. So I noticed a lot of these are using some of these earthy tones, so I wanted to get some colors that also include some of those earthy tones. What I want to do is see how I can mix these two together and create my own palette, taking from each of these. I also have an area where I'm getting fonts, and these are just screenshots from Google Fonts, so that I know if I want to use any of these, I can download them and use them in my design. There's also the option to paste in links. So if there's links that have some resources or some other examples that you want to reference, you could put them in here. I try to use as much visual though on this board because I like referencing it all at a glance. The other thing I have in here is the content outline, and this is just a Google Doc, and it's a rough outline that I can use to pull content from to use in my wireframe. This can also be a working document that you can share with a client or someone else, another copywriter, to make adjustments on. So my Figma starter file is pretty simple. I wanted to make sure it was something that allowed me to put my ideas down quickly. So this is leveraging Figma's variables. What I did was I assigned some of the variables that you'll find on Squarespace, like colors and fonts, the font family and font sizes, so I could just have them available in Figma. This is where I start wireframing. I do it all in grayscale so that I'm not distracted too much by color and I'm focused more on the layout and font combinations. You can see here I'm going for something that's a little more of an editorial layout that's using big type and white space and trying to create a little bit more of a dynamic layout. I also wanted to play with different variations, so see what this content would look like with different layouts. So trying to play around with positioning of the different elements to see what's kind of drawing my eye more. And the nice thing about Figma is that you can go through and you can preview these layouts so that you can start getting a feel for what this is going to look like in a browser. Once I have a couple layouts that I like, I move on to the color, and I'll start taking color from my mood board and start pulling swatches of some of the colors I like. And from here, I start building my palette. Once I have some colors that I like, I start pulling them into the design, and I start building out the other elements that weren't in the wireframe, like the main navigation. I start playing around with different color combinations with the type and the CTAs and the backgrounds. And you can see kind of how the wireframe evolved here into the design. I started adding more of the black lines around here to create separation. I decided to stay with one color for these buttons since multiple colors was a little too distracting. You'll notice in this layout that some of the content got rearranged also, so I did bring testimonials up and the tools section I brought down because I did want to introduce this email sign-up form. So I created this 2-column section at the very end of the layout that can house the tools for growth and the email sign-up form. And then I built out the footer. So one of the nice things about having the variables in Figma is that you can go around and you can change the variables if you want to see how a color looks in the layout without having to change every single instance. So if I wanted to change these buttons to something a little more brighter, I can do that by just changing this variable here. I can even look at different colors to see what would go well with the rest of my color palette here. I can also do the same for CTAs if I wanted to try something a little bit different from that orange, maybe something a little more muted or earthy. I can see what that would look like, and you'll see all of the instances where I use that color change throughout the layout by just changing that one variable. So once I built this in Squarespace, I got pretty close to where the Figma layout was just using the Fluid engine without too much custom CSS. This is the layout with the custom CSS, and you can see it's pretty close. I'll go ahead and show you what this looks like without the custom CSS. I'll just comment this out. And now you can see what the custom CSS is doing. So right away you can see that this headline here is a different color and it doesn't have the highlights in there. There's also these buttons that have the double line here. Those were the only things I really had to modify with custom CSS to get it closer to the layout. Everything else is following the design pretty closely. One call out I wanted to make is for this font, I had to use the monospace or miscellaneous font. In the editor, it's monospace, but when you look in the site styles, it's called miscellaneous. They're the same thing. I had to target the monospace font through code to be able to create these italics and bold styles within the headline. One of the downsides of using the monospace font is that it doesn't give you all of the options that you normally would get. So you can't bold or italicize or add color to the monospace font for some reason. And there's no ability to do that within the site styles either in Squarespace. In order to do the italicizing and bolding of this text, I had to use the highlight feature in Squarespace to target the element. So I use CSS to override the default highlighting and use it to bold and italicize the font. I was able to create the mobile layout in Squarespace using what I already had created for desktop. And because of Fluid Engine, it makes it pretty easy to shift objects around and relay things out. So this was just easier to build in Squarespace instead of Figma. So I just wanted to leverage that strength of Squarespace for my mobile design. So this is where the design is currently. There's still a lot to do. I have to build out more interior pages. And as I go through, there might be more design patterns that I may want to create within Figma, so I may create more pages there. But this was more of an exercise to see how I could use Figma in my Squarespace design workflow and if it would save me time or make things more difficult. Once I got into Squarespace, building this was pretty quick and straightforward since I already had everything defined in Figma. All I had to do was update the global styles and start building out these sections, and it came together pretty fast. Once I had it in a good place, then I started experimenting with the CSS to get it closer to what I had in my Figma design file. I'll keep going through this process to see how helpful it is as I build out other pages. And if there's any roadblocks, I'll definitely document them and make more videos about them. I know this is only using a fraction of what's available in Figma, but I wanted to create something simple. I liked having the FigJam board there for reference when I was in design. I also liked using it when I was working on the copy. Having variables was also super helpful because I could make the sweeping changes across the whole layout without having to change every instance individually. I'm still working on this, and I think there's going to be improvements that I can still make, but if you have any improvements or ideas, I'd love to hear them in the comments. And if you found some value from this, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.